Hello, and welcome to our broadcast, brought to you by Arrow. I'm your host, Katie Pavoso from the Channel Company. It's projected that by 2025, the amount of data created in a single year will surpass the amount of data generated in the entire first decade of the millennium. Not only do businesses need to determine how to manage, store, and protect that data, but they also need to be able to draw actionable insights from it. HPE and AMD have the cost-effective solutions to help you aid your clients to manage and make sense of their data. And Arrow can provide you with a streamlined approach to sell and deliver these solutions to your customer base. For more on this, I'm now joined by Gabriel Minardis, AMD Technology Solutions Manager, and Cal Liming, AMD Solutions Business Manager at HPE. Thank you both so much. Let's dive into our first segment, the growth of data. So Gabriel, you're going to start us off. The amount of data being generated is increasing rapidly and creating new challenges for businesses and IT experts. Can you describe some of the challenges this accelerated data generation causes for your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on today. So I really see the challenges in two buckets, infrastructure challenges and business challenges. And let's address infrastructure challenges first. The first thing you have to decide when you're faced with the amount of data growth that's happening and is how you're going to manage that from a hardware perspective. When you decide what you're going to save, you got to decide where you're going to save it and what kind of platform you're going to use to turn that data into something that you can actually produce insights on, right? I mean, that's really the whole point. So everything from the ground up, the server platform, the networking fabric, the storage technologies, and then on top of that, the infrastructure choices as far as software packages and applications and database technologies, all that needs to be planned out for you to really harness the power of your data.
Gabriel, you're right on, spot on there. So it's what to save versus what to discard. Not only whenever you save it, it's how you're saving it, and then also what data protection you're actually putting on top of that. And then when you're discarding that data, how you're discarding it in a safe manner versus just letting it float out there in the ether.
Yeah, that's really true. And one of the things that you can't get away from in a discussion about infrastructure challenges is the need for security, right? You cannot turn on the TV or go to your news feed on the internet without getting some kind of security breach incident. It seems like daily, but certainly weekly. And as data is collected in companies, it's really become one of the most valuable assets for that company, especially if they're making use of that data to move the business forward. And so obviously it's become a lucrative target for cyber criminals. And so you have to really pay special attention. And small, medium business is not immune from this. Security is at the forefront of design for what AMD and HPE are doing together. HPE brings their silicon root of trust and a host of other security technologies to the platform. And from the AMD perspective, we also bake in security into the EPYC processor with our AMD Infinity Guard technology. And that extends into the rest of the server subsystems. We have a couple of technologies in particular that are targeted at encrypting the memory, right? So that memory is secure, and then also encrypting virtual machines so that they're immune from or hardened against attack from cyber criminal activity as well.
So Gabe, I want to touch a little bit more on that. So yeah, whenever we talk about small, medium businesses, the ones you hear about in the news, those are the high profile ones. Whenever we start talking about from a small, medium business perspective, these are the ones that fall victim to ransomware, They're the ones that get everything locked down. These are the ones that you don't hear about in the news. And whenever we look at that, a lot of the times the high profile events are just because they are so high profile that they've actually been have actually made the news cycle. But this happens daily, if not hourly, for a lot of those customers that are out there. The other thing to kind of look at and take into consideration here, whenever you bring up security, those Infinity Guard features are included at no extra charge. All you have to do is actually just turn them on within the system. So whenever we talk about security being a massive focus for us within HPE, it's even more so within the AMD side. That's the encrypted processor on the EPYC processor. Then with the ILO chip, it's the old phrase two is one. One is none. We actually have two pieces of hardware that are allowing for or maintaining that security footprint within the AMD platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Thanks, Cal. And so those are kind of, talking about this exponential growth of data. Those are kind of the infrastructure challenges, that I see out there with customers. On the business challenge side, the issues are more related to being, a good way to think about it is a lot of customers are data rich but insight poor, right? So they got mounds of data, and the data is just sitting there, and they're not getting any value out of it. And it's worse than sometimes it's worse than not getting any value out of it. Sometimes that data is costing them because it's fueling bad decisions, or it's taking up resources that could otherwise be spent elsewhere, right? So there's an interesting statistic that I came across the other day, that 30% of annual revenue is impacted by bad data. So in other words, bad data costs companies 30% or more of their annual revenue. And so it really requires companies to put a comprehensive data analytics and management plan in place, right? You've got to decide what you're going to keep. Too many companies are out there just keeping every little scrap of data because they're scared that they're going to, if they throw something away, they're throwing away something important, because they're not doing the analysis of what matters and what doesn't. So there's a lot of noise in the data that needs to be sifted through, and a plan has to be developed to say, okay, this is worth keeping, this other stuff we just let go, right? Because data can fuel growth. I mean, that's a proven fact that companies that engage with their data in a relevant way to drive business, they can cost effectively manage their data. It's organized. They have a system for accessing it quickly to gain insights. They have a huge competitive advantage over the companies that aren't doing that. Right.
Gabe, I want to jump back to one of those points that you said, is companies are saving every piece of data because they don't know if it's good or bad. That's kind of the same as whenever you go to your mailbox and you open it up and there's a stack of junk mail that just says to current resident. And that's literally you putting it in the file cabinet and holding on to it for 5 years because you haven't had the opportunity to read through it. Now that's a once a day occurrence, but if you think about it from a technology perspective, and these companies that are collecting that data, that's happening every second. So they're constantly putting junk mail into the file cabinet, and they're having to buy new file cabinets constantly just to keep up with the amount of data that's coming in.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, and I have to admit I'm a little bit guilty of that. I've got a stack of stuff here on my desk that's been there.
I think we all do.
That I need to go through. But yeah, you take that and you multiply it, by thousands, and it becomes a real issue for companies. The other thing that it feeds into is this idea that data has gravity. You may have heard of data gravity and before, and all that really is an analogy that the more of it you have, the harder it is to deal with. And the more of it that you have, the harder it is to move, like a big rock versus a pebble, right? You can flick a pebble anywhere you want. You're gonna bash your finger if you try to flick a boulder. So, as companies collect this data, they really need to make sure that they're capturing what's important, getting rid of the stuff that's not, because once you get to a certain size, it becomes very difficult to move that data around in your environment. And whether you want to put it up in a cloud for redundancy or over into another data center for backup and disaster recovery, or you just want to do analysis of it on a different system in part of your environment, once you start moving around huge amounts of data, you're talking about time, energy, all the things associated with data movement, right? So it's way more effective to have just what you need, and then to process that in place as much as possible, right?
Yeah, to filter out the noise, because whenever you start talking about that larger data gravity concept, a 50 gig environment, if you're moving it over a 1 gig network, you're talking about taking the entire bandwidth of your network for about a minute just to make a move. And that's even kind of a conservative aspect. And whenever we start looking at it, there's more data that's growing every year. So there's a statistic out there that over the next 3 years, there's going to be more data collected than in the last 30 years. So if you're talking about a 50 gig environment today, that's, we're looking at, the number is exponentially terabytes that you're having to move consistently, and you're consuming, like we said, resources to do that. And that's just to save what you don't even know if you need to save.
So, Gabriel, you talked a lot about companies often being data rich, but insight poor. And I'd like to get a little bit more into that topic. What value opportunity is being missed if your customers are unable to draw insights and critical information from their data? We did get into this quite a bit, but I'd like to hear some actual examples.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So we already discussed that companies that are doing nothing with data are at a very, they're in competitive disadvantage to companies that are doing it well. And the companies that are doing it well, they're gaining the ability to do things like deliver personalized experiences to their customers. In addition to building customer relationships and anticipating what customers are going to buy based on previous history or seasonality, or all these factors that need to be considered that are hidden in the data today, they also have the ability to now identify hidden issues. Right. So when you've got this pile of actionable data that you can look through, you may be able to surface, and often they are able to surface, issues that aren't on the radar today, because the data just, they were so hidden that it took correlating multiple streams of data together to surface those issues. And so now they go from a mode where they're completely reactive, and customers are calling and complaining, and they're having to staff up their call center because something got out of hand, to being very proactive and being able to send out personalized communication to customers when issues arise, or the data can surface something that just needs to be optimized internally to make the business run smoother. And then, another area where we're seeing data make a big difference is in getting answers to very complex questions, right? So questions that can't be answered with just a simple supply and demand application today, to really delve into the correlation between supply and demand in a way that hasn't been done previously.
Cal, would you like to add to that?
Well, I think, Gabriel, is one of the things that we've kind of talked about is it's not only what they're missing, it's what they're actually doing sometimes whenever they're unable to draw. It's what's the phrase, the suboptimal decision making. Let's just call it what it is. It's bad decisions, right? Whenever you happen those things, those are like missed opportunities for new revenue. Those are missed opportunities for increasing their market share, or those customer engagements, as you were just kind of talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's the potential to tie together multiple streams of data, right? Now we have the technology, we have the application, we have the hardware, we have the networking, the storage, all these pieces are there to take customer data from portals, from tech support organizations, from marketing, what's worked, what hasn't worked, click-throughs, click rates, if you're web-based, and now you have to garner insights from all that data, right? And the only way to view that is through the lens of data analytics and data management. And so now you can take all those streams, and you need to figure out, what the data is leading you to conclude, and what actions you can take based on those conclusions, right? So basically, the speed is of the essence, right? So the quicker you can get to some kind of actionable insight, the faster you're able to turn that around into something that makes a business impact for your company. And so, now we're looking back at the infrastructure level again. At the root of it, you have to build systems that are not bottlenecked, right? We talked about data gravity and the challenge of moving data from one system to another, or from one location to another. And the better answer would be to just be able to process everything in memory, right? Memory sits right next to the processor, has extremely big bandwidth and high speed link. But the problem is that data sets usually are too big for just memory. But with AMD and HPE systems, you can put a whole lot of memory in these systems, right? And so even something as simple as looking at the memory configuration, looking at the disk I/O subsystems, things like that, you really need to right size it for the application, for the workload, and that's where HPE and AMD come in, and along with Arrow, to deliver to customers the recommendations, right? We've got experts in all these fields, but to get to a place where you're not having to rely on making decisions in a week, right? You have to be able to do it at split second level sometimes in order to take advantage of that, because your competitors are.
Another thing is also kind of taking that a step back there, Gabriel. It's Arrow and HP and AMD. We've done this for so many customers. We know how to tune the box, to tweak the knobs, to get to where we're getting that performance that you need to be able to make those split second decisions, if you will. And that even kind of goes back to do we save this data or do we leave this data? Is it worth us even holding on to? That's what we're trying to get to help customers out with, because going back to that data gravity, we're kind of making circular conversations here, and I hate to say it that way, but we're really getting back to, is data good or bad? And those are the conversations, or that's what we're looking at, those hardware pieces to be able to make those impactful decisions on whether you save something or you don't save something. If you save something, how long do you save it for? Things along those lines.
Yeah. Well, and here's the good news for us being, AMD, HPE, and Arrow together, is that this is a wide open field, right? A lot of companies are aware of the need for some kind of data plan, how to deal with data, how to action on data. But in surveys I've seen, it's somewhere between 74 and 70%, 76% of customers surveyed don't have a well-defined governance process in place for key data-related decisions. They just don't. They don't have a data plan. Around 76% of respondents in a recent survey said that they do not have a data-driven, they have not transformed to a data-driven organization. So there's a huge opportunity here to help customers make that transition.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for that. It's going to bring us right into our second segment now, extracting value from data. So first question here, what are customers demanding from you and your partner base to help them manage and extract value from their data? Obviously, by now we know there's a ton of value in that data, but how exactly do you get it? Cal, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Yeah. So whenever we talk with customers and they're actually looking for something, they're coming to us for that expertise, right? We've been doing this for many years, decades at this point, to help design and support and plan and implement an end-to-end intelligent data solution. And what I mean by that is kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, removing those bottlenecks, making sure that we're tuning that system to be able to consistently grow and scale, so that way we're not pigeonholing ourselves into a solution and making a capital expenditure day one that's not going to pay for itself by the end of even year 5. As we continue down that pathway, we actually have a solution that just has really kind of come to market very recently. When I say recently brought to market, it actually still has to be done through the full custom process at HPE. It's what we call the AMD Extreme Search solution. This is where we're utilizing AMD processors with AMD FPGAs on the drives themselves. So instead of having to actually move the data from the drive across the controller bus out to the processor to then go into memory to then make actions on it, we're doing that at the drive itself. So whenever we start looking at that, there's 24 up to 24 drives in a system to where we can run those parallel streams all at the same time, and we're able to shrink the amount of time required to make actionable insights on data significantly because of that.
Thanks so much. Moving right along to our next question in this segment. What is the business opportunity channel providers have in providing data management solutions to customers? I think we could probably draw a lot based on our last questions, but could you give me some specific examples?
Sure, I'll jump in, and Cal and I have discussed this in the past. I'm going to steal something that Cal said that I really liked. He said, "There's margin and mystery." And what business opportunity are channel providers presented with in this space? It's margin. It can potentially be a very large margin or margin rich engagement with customers, because you're dealing with something that's not easy to do, right?
Very lucrative. Very
Yes.
lucrative.
Yeah, there's a big difference between just selling hardware for general purpose compute and assisting a customer on the journey to becoming a data-driven organization, right? And if you can position yourself in that high value workload of database analytics and data management, then you're able to charge a premium for that. In addition to that, when you go down to the basics of starting even at the hardware level again, these solutions require more horsepower than your average kind of solution, right? They're much more akin. They touch on HPC. They can potentially touch on machine learning, and artificial intelligence can be brought into the equation as well. So you're talking about at a solution level, bringing together components that are very rich configurations, high in memory capacity, high in drive capacity, applications that, if you're selling the software, could also be very lucrative. And then you wrap that with the services and support, to deliver that to the customers as a service, right? And then you're talking about an even bigger potential revenue boost.
And then going down that same kind of thought process, even if the channel partner doesn't have the in-house expertise to have these kind of conversations or these interactions, that's where HPE and Arrow do. And we actually have the ability to resell those services, or they have the ability to resell those services. I mean, we can come in and kind of white glove it, if you will. We can help them learn the process to actually bring this to be an expertise in-house.
Thanks so much for that. Speaking of provider profitability and success and opportunities, what are the hero solutions and services that HPE and AMD offer partners and customers to help manage and make sense of their data? And how does this vendor partnership help those partners stand out from the competition?
So whenever it comes to data management, we have a couple of go-to platforms or hero platforms, or however we want to phrase it. It's actually based on our both our single socket and our dual socket technologies. Our HPE ProLiant DL345 Gen 10 Plus server is a database management purpose-built system. It has a significant amount of IO capacity. It's actually maximizing those IO slots and storage capacity to address those database workloads. And whenever I say maximizing, we're talking about a 2U box that has I believe the last number was around 400 terabytes of internal storage capacity right off the bat. This is all based on that single socket solution. So you're not losing anything by going that route. You have a significant number of IO lanes, being 128 PCIe lanes coming out of that processor. The benefit of that is that low total cost of ownership. You're not paying for anything you don't need. You don't need a second socket. You're not populating it in there. It's cost effective. It's optimized from that core based or socket based licensing compared to a two socket system. Now, if you do need that extra horsepower, that second socket, this is where we move into the DL385 Gen 10 Plus V2. This is based on the most current AMD EPYC solution, and it's purpose built with high core count. And when I say high core count, I mean currently at 128 physical cores in that two-use platform. You have that increased memory capacity, that greater IO capacity, and a significant number of PCIe lanes, whether you're running SAS SATA or full NVMe environments to actually, decrease that latency, increase that bandwidth. But going down the pathway, there's 59 current world records for data management.
Yeah, EPYC holds 59 world records for data management currently, 31 for structured data and analytics, and 28 for unstructured. That's with what's in the market today, and of course we're continuing to innovate, and I expect nothing but growth in this area as we continue to focus on it with HPE and Arrow. You'd expect me to say EPYC's absolutely the best processor for data analytics because I've got an AMD logo behind me, but I honestly would say this whether I had that logo behind me or not. I've got a technology background, and I can just say from looking at the underlying under the hood, from the amount of IO that's supported in the processor to the performance that is world class, best class performance in the processor. They're really these processors and the systems that are that they fuel at HPE. There it just is no better solution for database and for data analytics. And that we've proved that out with the world records that we mentioned, and what Cal's mentioned as far as specific targeted solutions and workloads, from the extreme search solution that Cal referenced to database solutions built around SQL or Oracle, including non-SQL or NoSQL database solutions like MongoDB and Cassandra. You can go out to Google and find reference architectures for all of these technologies on AMD HPE platforms.
There's another one, Gabriel, as well. Is it's actually a company called Tiger Graph.
Right.
So this is a reference architecture. It's based on our DL385 Gen 10 Plus platforms, and the Xilinx FPGA cards that I kind of mentioned earlier. But it allows you to actually make and do visual representations of your data in near real time as it's actually coming in. So whenever we were looking at and talking about, what's good data, what's bad data, this helps you kind of actually determine that, just from a user perspective.
Yeah, that's right. And graph database in general is a really up and coming technology. It's not hugely adopted right now, but the statistics I've seen say that in the next 3 or 5 years, 80% of companies are going to be doing some kind of graph database workload. So if that's one that you're not already familiar with, now's the time to do so, and then check out that reference architecture.
Gentlemen, my last question for you today is, how do HPE and AMD join forces together, if you will, to scale to meet customer needs?
So we actually do this through our distribution partners like Arrow. Whenever we're talking about companies as large as HPE and AMD, there are a lot of people who have many different work streams going on, and utilizing distribution like your Arrow account managers, they'll actually be able to make sure that they're getting you to the right contacts who can actually get you an answer or a solution very quickly.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. That brings us to the end of our time together. And thank you at home for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about what we've discussed here, you can check out the web address on your screen. Once more, I'm Katie Bavoso. Thanks for watching.